A young athlete came and visited me today with some significant lower back and hip pain. She presented with a significant anterior pelvic tilt, which, as many of you know, is going to drive a kind of a false or a pseudo hip internal rotation. If you dump that pelvis forward, the hip is going to just naturally internally rotate. And this is just part of the normal biomechanics of hip flexion. So what we noticed, however, was that she initiated all of her activities, every motion that she attempted to initiate. Didn't matter if it was just walking, squatting, jumping, jogging. Everything began with a rib flare, more extension and compression of the lower back, as well as hip flexor tightness. As a result, especially when we tried to get her to jump or land, that hip would internally rotate, starts in an internally rotated position, would internally rotate even further, so we end up with that valgus collapse of the knees. So there would be knock knees, her knees would come together when she went down into that squat, when she tried to jump, and then again when she tried to land. So we thought about her plan, about how we're going to begin to undo this, and one of the exercises we began with was a bear crawl. Interestingly enough, when we began her bear crawl, she would dump into an anterior pelvic tilt, so kind of that classic quadruped cow pose, if you're familiar with yoga. So she would dump into the anterior pelvic tilt, she would extend her lower back. Not only that, but her hip, as she began to bear crawl forward, her hip would internally rotate, her heel would actually kick out away from midline. And so after a few moments of coaching, we just determined that she does not have the requisite motor control core stability to even keep her hip in a neutral position, in a midline position, even in that classic bear crawl pose. So we decided to start her somewhere else. This is where we started her, and we had some significant progress, significant improvement. So again, when we're thinking about pelvic neutrality and how an anterior pelvic tilt may actually result in hip internal rotation and valgus collapse for young athletes, the thing that we noticed with her immediately when we tried to introduce the bear crawl was that when she got into the bear crawl position, and tried to take a step forward, so if I tried to take a step forward here, she would dump her pelvis into that classic cow pose, kick her heel out to the side, and then try to move forward, and then she'd come back into midline, and then she'd do the exact same thing on the other side, dump the pelvis forward, kick the heel out, and try and move forward. And so recognizing after a few moments of cueing that it simply wasn't going to be possible for her to control that motion safely and effectively, we took a big step back and started her with this exercise. A big part of this too is that we have to understand before we begin which side we're lateralized toward. So in her case, her pelvis is lateralized toward the right. That essentially means that she's on a right oblique axis with her tailbone. Her tailbone is essentially facing to the right side, typically resulting in more external rotation, abduction of the ilium on the left side. The right side is going to be more internally rotated and adducted. So she's lateralized to this side beyond just kind of the sagittal plane motion. How do we neutralize that pelvis in the front to back plane? Which side is she more lateralized to? Because that has to be part of our decision-making process. If we don't understand this, it could get worse. So we know that she's lateralized to the right. We want to bring her back into neutrality, not just front to back, but also with regard to her left and right axis. So then what we did was, in order to bring her back the other way, to move that pelvis from pointing to the right side back into midline, and maybe even overcorrecting a little bit, get her going the other way a little bit, what we then have to do is create essentially more internal rotation at the left hip. In order to bring us back the other way, that left ilium, that left side of the pelvis, has to come back the other way as well. We want to do both sides because we want to correct her anterior pelvic tilt and give her motor control there, but we also need to make sure that she can move left to right through the pelvis. So the way that we did that is we just really, again, took a step back and made this much more easy, something that resembles a bear crawl but gives her plenty of control so that she feels comfortable with these motions. So in order to create the ability to move that pelvis back into a more neutral and centralized, back into a more neutral and centrated position, we raised the right knee. So we, in a sense, took her in that right position more over to the right side, creating more of an opportunity to come back to the left effectively. So I'm going to raise the right knee. I'm going to take a small yoga ball, put it between the knees, and then we're going to coach her into a neutral pelvis, maybe even slightly rounded lower back. I'm going to keep the toes in contact with the ground. One of the faults that we see and where people begin to kind of move all over the place and dump into positions we don't want them to get into is they attempt to lift the knee and the foot, and they end up compensating that rotation. So we're going to keep the toe in contact with the ground. Now I'm going to take the left knee. I want to tilt the pelvis more toward the left side, keeping the toes on the ground, keeping the lower back in a neutral position. I want to raise the left knee, breathe in through the nose, long, slow, in through the nose, exhale on the way down. So this actually was very difficult for her in the early stages. I'm just rolling that ball up on the inner thigh of my right thigh. The right knee is staying in place. The knee comes up. I don't want to lean over. I don't want to create a big compensation. I want to keep this hip in place as much as possible. Long, slow, silent inhale. Raise that left knee as high as you can, comfortably and in control. All the while maintaining that neutral pelvic tilt position and a neutral lower back. So for her, we wanted to be able to correct this on both sides. So because she is more lateralized to the right, we had her do twice as many on the left as on the right. So we would give her 15 repetitions on the left side, go over to the other side, take her back the other way, 15 repetitions to the right, and then have her do one more set on that left side. So if you have questions about this, anterior pelvic tilt, that valgus collapse of the knees when you jump or land, please reach out to us. We'd love to talk it over with you. I hope that was helpful. I will see you here again next time.